Hello, everybody. This is Matthijs Beckers on the Nuclear Humanist, and with me I have a gold. I want to say golden oldie.
You
uh,
both right on both counts.
a friend to the channel, somebody who's been on here a couple of times already, and it's Alan Medsker. So the reason why I'm talking to Alan today is because there's something going on in Illinois, and that's the home state of Alan, actually. And so Alan, why don't you introduce the viewers to what is going on in Illinois?
Okay, well, again, I'm Alan Medsker, and I live in a northwest suburb of Chicago, Illinois. And Chicago is powered by nuclear. You can see the Chicago skyline there, and it's the Chicago flag. It's a knockoff on that. So it's
Yeah.
powered by nuclear underneath. That's really was a pretty awesome uh, piece of art that we got put onto a T-shirt. Made up a few of those. But so Illinois has six nuclear plants, locations. Some people refer to individual reactors as nuclear plants, but in this case, I'm talking about locations. So we have uh, four in kind of the northern part of the state, one on a western border, and one that's a little bit further south.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the four that are up here are Byron, Dresden, LaSalle, and Braidwood. And those are all dual unit locations. So they all have two big reactors. Only one of them has cooling towers,
Mm.
Byron. Rest of them are by rivers. And for Dresden, there's an interesting little factoid I'll tell you about later. Um, and then there's the Quad Cities plant, which is on the Mississippi River, and
Mm-hmm.
it uses Mississippi River for a diverted water stream to do that cooling. And then there's and that's a uh, two unit plant in Cordova, Illinois. And then the uh, the only single unit location we have is Clinton, and Clinton is about an hour northeast of our capital, Springfield, down towards the center of the state, the middle of the state.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that has a pond. It's actually a small lake that's a Department of Natural Resources managed location. It's very popular for camping and fishing and recreational boating. The water's a little bit warmer there because of the nuclear plant, and the fish love it in this particular case. Um, so between all of those plants, we have 11 reactors, and the generation mix that we have in Illinois is about 53, 54% nuclear
Mm-hmm.
as a result of that. So that's the entire state, all the generation assets that we have. Um, uh, the consumption is a little different because we actually export quite a bit of that power. Um,
Obviously.
and up here north, we really are powered by nuclear. I mean, obviously the electrons are not particular about who generates them, where they go, but generally speaking, the power that we get up here in the northern part of the state, in the by far most populous part of the state. So Chicago is a very big metropolitan area um, with millions and millions of people, and downstate Illinois is much more rural. It's very different, and it's very lightly populated, comparatively speaking. And there are plenty of coal plants in Illinois still. We have about 34% of our mix is coal.
Mm.
Um, and Illinois is actually a pretty big coal mining state still. And they still have curriculum at Southern Illinois University. It's a state school. One of my sons went there, and they have curriculum on coal mining, mining,
Mm-hmm.
but specifically for coal in some of that work because it's still a thing. So we don't have much natural gas in the state, um, and I don't believe that we allow fracking at all. So there's no.
Yeah,
um,
but your neighboring
wells.
states like Ohio and Indiana, they do have a lot of gas, right?
Yeah, Indiana uh, does. Iowa has a lot of wind, and we do
Mm-hmm.
have some wind. We have a little bit of wind. We have almost no solar from a percentage perspective. The bar doesn't show up on the graphs.
Mm-hmm.
The wind bar does show up, and there are some pretty good sized wind farms. Um, it's the prairie state, right? So we
Mm-hmm.
have wind and we have flat areas. For my money, I'd rather see the farms and the silos, and I would rather not see the windmills. But we do have them.
So what is really what is troubling us right now,
Well,
with
right
these
now
nuclear
we've got
plants?
so all of these plants are expertly run. They're among the best run plants in the world, really.
Mm-hmm.
Exelon runs them all, and Quad Cities is partly owned by another company, but all the rest of every of those assets are all Exelon owned. Exelon's a generation utility
Mm-hmm.
in the U.S. They own plants in other states too, and they own some fossil plants in other states too. But right now we have those of you that follow me on Twitter will see me point out today's reminder that electricity markets are stupid, and we have a stupid electricity market. Not that any of them are really smart, but in this particular case, we've got a situation where fracked gas and heavily subsidized production tax credit subsidized wind um, kind of team up and push the nuclear plants out of the capacity market. They just have a hard time winning those auctions, and the capacity market auctions are a significant source of revenue for them. And the fact that we have to have capacity markets is stupid in and of itself, but we
Mm-hmm.
do have them. This is PJM is where these plants are that are currently at risk, and when I say at risk, what I mean is that Exelon has declared, as a matter of fact, that they will close the Byron plant, which is up near Rockford, Illinois,
Mm-hmm.
and in a community called Byron, and the Dresden plant, which is in Morris, Illinois, both of which are large 2 unit, um, among the largest power
Yeah.
plants in the country. Really, I think at least one of them is in the top 10.
Yeah,
I think,
but Byron is two and a half gigawatts,
yeah,
and Dresden is 2 gigawatts. So these are
yeah,
large power plants.
right. And their sole reason for shutting those down is that they are, depending on how you look at it, they're losing money or they're not making as nearly as much money as they would if they invested those operating funds in something else.
Hmm.
So they so Exelon has already said that, and that's been over a year, I believe, over a year ago that they said they would close these in this fall.
Yeah.
So this 2021, both of those plants. I mean, if all of that goes offline, then Illinois will become a net importer of dirty energy. So
Yes.
those coal plants and natural gas plants that are in the surrounding states will take over
So
for sure.
so let me understand this better. So is it a fact that the nuclear energy is more expensive than wind or natural gas or coal, or is it because the production of natural gas and wind are being given uh, um, uh, precedence over nuclear? Is it something like merit
Mm-hmm.
order? Like, okay, first the wind gets to sell their electricity, and then
Hmm.
the gas gets to sell their electricity, and then the nuclear, or is it something different that is creating this problem?
Well, I mean, and you'll get a little bit different take on this from different people that you talk to.
Mm.
As I understand it, the problem that nuclear has is that the attributes that make it such a desirable source of electricity, the reliability, the fact that it's clean, the fact that it's uh, it doesn't impact the environment. All of those things uh, are not appreciated, and not that stupid electricity market I was talking about
Yes.
doesn't care about anything but the price, right?
Yes.
And so because of that, you have gas plants that are using the atmosphere for their trash can, for CO2, but also for things that kill people, right? I mean, in the short term, not just a climate change thing,
Yeah.
but
Yes. Aerosols.
particulates
Yep.
and NOx and SOx and that sort of thing. So there's a death print associated with closing a nuclear plant because it increases those emissions from other plants. And then the production tax credits that wind continues to get, that they continue to, federal government continues to extend. Pretty much every time they are about to expire, they will extend those. They get lots of pressure to do that. Um, that means that even when the electricity market doesn't want more electricity, sometimes the owners of those wind farms will still will not curtail them,
Mm.
and let them run, and so that might actually drive the price for a particular generator location, an area, that where PJM is managing this. They're going to send pricing signals, and they're going to basically raise or lower the price of the electricity to make it more or less likely that the generators will stay online. And sometimes those prices actually go negative. They'll actually charge you to send your juice out onto the grid.
Yes.
And that does happen to the nuclear plants from time to time, because it's these plants were built decades ago and designed farther ago than that, and they run best as baseload sources, assets, which means that they are not going to be really flexible for ramping up and down. So if they back off to avoid paying, um, to send the electricity out on the grid, then it'll take them 8 hours or maybe even more to ramp back up to capacity. By which time the price will have changed again and gone back up,
Yes.
and so
So
they
so
lose out on that
basically,
opportunity.
if I understand it correctly, so gas has more flexibility, which means that they can eat more easily adjust to the trappings of the wind, so to speak. Because
Right.
if you have a lot of wind capacity, and the wind blows, that means that you get this surge of electricity, and there is more electricity than is needed at that moment,
Right.
which drives the price down. But it also, and gas there is obviously a window in which gas can profit from these fluctuations, but the
Sure. Yeah.
nuclear power plants in essence aren't being given that same opportunity, so they get pushed out of the market in essence. That's
Well,
that's that's basically the gist of it.
yeah. I mean, it's really the nuclear plants aren't built to do stuff like that,
Mm.
and the market doesn't care that they're not built to do stuff like that. The other thing is that if a nuclear plant does back off, it doesn't save the nuclear plant operator any money.
No, no.
They still have the same
Yes.
fuel change out
They
schedule. They have the same
exactly. They have a
staff, everything.
fixed they have
Right.
a fixed amount of money that they need to pay to their staff and everyone, and the fuel is uh, uh, such a marginal cost to the plant that it
Mm-hmm.
really doesn't matter whether you will keep running for 300 days straight, or whether you don't use it at all. It's not going to matter that much in the
Yeah.
total cost of operating the plant. Whereas at a gas plant, the fuel costs are much higher. So
Yeah, yeah, close to 80 or 90% of the cost of running the plant, I think, is
yes,
fuel. So they save all of that when, unless they have to maybe idle, but that's going to be a very small percentage of their when they're running at capacity. Um, so it's like I said, it's a market failure.
Yes.
ultimately. And Exelon is basically saying, we're a for-profit corporation.
You cannot blame Exelon
Right.
for
It's
making this decision. This is obviously a policy failure. So what is it that people are trying to do to save these plants at this moment?
So there's a couple of different approaches that get taken. There's one of the problems that kind of loomed, that I think might have been the straw that broke the camel's back from Exelon's perspective, is there's a minimum offer price rule, MOPR, MOPR, ruling that came from the federal regulator of the grid, FERC, and they basically said that that you couldn't use. It's basically something that worked against all clean energy sources in a way that, and I don't want to get into those weeds because I'm not very good at
Mm.
describing it, but that was just kind of one more thing. And um, the so Exelon's, um, I forgot where I was going with that now. What
That's
was
all
your
right.
question again?
Yeah. So what are people trying to do to
Okay, so
rectify
right,
this problem?
right. So to fix that, there's something called the fixed resource requirement, um, that can be implemented by, in our case, it would probably be implemented by a state agency that basically takes over the capacity market for those, for selected resources. So the Illinois Power Agency, we have that, we have an agency for that already. And they're capable of doing that kind of thing. They have people that know how to do that. And they could, they could make the capacity markets, pull them out of the PJM market, and so that MOPA rule would not apply anymore. And um, the provision that the ruling allows is the fixed resource requirement. So what that means is that you can then basically do, I mean, it's almost like a power purchase agreement, um, where you say, I need this much clean energy, and you set that number to be something that you can only get if the nuclear plants provide it.
Right.
You could do similar things for your other clean energy resources. So
Yeah.
your
And,
wind
and
or solar or whatever.
yeah, in essence, this would prevent the nuclear power plant from being susceptible to all these price fluctuations, because you said it's like a PPA, which means that you
Well,
fix the price, or
I mean, it's I don't know if it actually fixes the price, but it allows the capacity market to be something that the nuclear plants can actually play in. I think is how
okay,
that
okay,
works. So again, I'm not anywhere near an expert on that, but
yeah, yeah.
it
No,
does
don't worry about it. I'll I'll
it
I'll
does
I'll
make it
interview more people about this subject. So,
well,
if
and
you,
it does make it, make it possible. Unfortunately, um, because of all the things that have to happen, in the time frame that we're talking about. Exelon needs to make a decision,
yeah, quickly,
really by next month,
yeah,
because they have to order fuel or not order fuel,
yes,
and for those reactors, which will, one unit of which in each location will need to be refueled this fall if they continue to run.
right.
So they have to make that decision, and they have, there's other investments that they would make or not make based on that. Um, but the that's just one of the ways that could be done. But
There,
it's
the,
probably not something that could happen in the
yeah.
time frame that we have to do it.
There's also the Clean Air Jobs Act or something like that.
Well, okay, so let me talk about the different bills in just a
Yes.
second. The other mechanism that can be used is to create a pool of credits, that the clean energy credits of some sort. So in the case of the FIJA bill from a few years ago, where we had the Quad Cities and the Clinton plants were in the same kind of situation. Um, they they passed a bill. The state legislature passed a bill that included zero emissions credits,
Hmm.
and what those basically are is it's a very small uptick on a on the wholesale rate of electricity that those two plants are allowed to charge. Um, and you know, they have to open their books and show it to, you know, the commissioners, that they're still show them enough financial information to validate that they're still qualified for those credits.
Right.
And then and so they get just a little bit extra money, which basically covers, you know, what they would have what they lose because they can't win the capacity market auctions. There's uh, a similar type of thing called carbon mitigation credit. And to be honest, I actually don't even know what the difference is, but they call it something different. Um, and so the uh, the the there's four bills that are in front of the legislature now, that do or don't have one or more of those things that I just talked about.
Right. Right.
So the CEJA bill, the Clean Energy Jobs Act, is a bill backed by the major environmental organizations, the Sierra Club, the NRDC, and then there's an organization called the Illinois Environmental Council, which is uh, you know, small nonprofit. It's actually not so small. I mean, they've got full time lobbyists,
Right.
and they work on behalf. They're funded by these other organizations, and they are based in Springfield, and they work on behalf of all people that you know want clean energy and traditional environmental stuff,
Hmm.
environmental justice. You know, there's some other things that they work on as well. And So they were instrumental and are instrumental in authoring and pushing the CEJA bill. The
Yeah.
CEJA bill does not have um, enough in it for Exelon to say, yes, this will save the plants. We
Right.
know that because that's what Exelon has basically said. So, um, and it changed between last year and this year. It's been, you know, as a bill for quite some time. It did not get passed last year. Lots of stuff didn't happen last year because of COVID, but one of the things that didn't happen is CEJA didn't pass, and when it came um, back and got reintroduced.
So let's get back. So it's the Clean Air
The Clean
Jobs
Energy
Act.
Jobs Act. And that bill will not save the plants. And not only that, but the people that are backing that bill, primarily the big players,
Uh huh.
all are assuming that the nuclear plants cannot be relicensed and have their licenses extended past, certainly past 2050.
Right.
But even some of the ones, I don't remember off the top of my head which ones expire when, but all of them can be running for many more decades. And we really don't know how long, because every 20
Yeah.
years, you know, they do an assessment and they, you know, consider an extension. And so, and the NRC is looking at, you know, as much as 120 years now. So um, that's uh,
Yeah.
that's a big bone that we have to pick with them, right?
Exactly,
They're
because
just assuming.
you see it happen all over the U.S. at this moment. I mean, the last one to be extended for another 20 years is the Surrey nuclear
Yeah,
power plant, and they will run for 80 years once this license extension is over. And there's no telling
right.
whether it will be closed by then or not, whether it can go on for
Hmm.
another 20 years. So
Yeah.
I
So
understand your point absolutely. So so
yeah,
so
so
you're
that's
saying
a
that could it be helpful if this act would be passed? Could it be helpful at least?
um. There's an outside chance that it might um, have something that would be helpful for the other plants that are also at risk. I mean, basically, Exelon has said all four of those plants up north that I talked about.
Hmm.
So, you know, Byron and Dresden, and then
LaSalle and
LaSalle and
Braidwood.
Braidwood.
Yeah.
all of those are at risk of being closed if nothing changes, right? And I'm pretty sure that they all would close if we did nothing. Um, there may be something in CJ that would allow the LaSalle and Braidwood plants to take advantage of a fixed resource requirement type of capacity auction takeover of there is some language in there about that, but like I said, I'm not. It got changed last year, and last year it was good enough to save the plants. This year it's not. That's what we're told. So
So
I don't know the specifics of what
yeah.
changed, but the bottom line is that it's not good enough.
So is there another is there other legislation being
Yeah. So there's
proposed?
four other. There's three other bills at least. There's probably some others that aren't really being looked at closely, but there's um, there's a downstate bill. There's a large generation utility called Ameren, and they own lots of coal plants. And they've introduced some legislation which, um, you know, I mean, it's legislation proposed by somebody that owns a lot of coal plants, and so they have plans to close many of those plants, and they're looking at transition plans for workers, and putting in renewable energy at those locations, some of them, and that sort of thing. Um, and that doesn't have anything to help the nukes.
Hmm.
There's something called Path to 100, which is Path to 100%
Renewable,
renewable,
exactly.
and it's a much lighter bill, and it really just focuses on doing more renewable stuff. I think it's probably got a little bit more workplace diversity kinds of things in it. Maybe
Hmm.
um, it's supported by the Black Caucus as well as others in the legislature. And then there's one called CUJA, the Climate Union Jobs Act. Um, and CUJA has the CUJA is a great bill. We really like it. It's got lots of things to support unionized labor and just labor in general.
Hmm.
Um, so prevailing wage requirements, uh, money set aside for apprentice programs, job training programs, provisions to ensure that in-state renewables, wind and solar that get built can't be done by just some cheap imported out-of-state labor,
Hmm.
but that we have to use our local workforces for that. Um, and But the big thing is it includes a carbon mitigation credit pool that's big enough for the two plants, and goes for 10 years, I think, is what the limit is. It's the same as what it was for FIJA for the zero emissions credits. Um, and I do believe that Exxon probably had some input into creating that, and they do work closely with labor,
Hmm.
because many of the power plants are staffed by union labor, much of it. So and there's it's gotten a fair amount of publicity, and it's got quite a few co-sponsors on the Senate and the House bill. What's happening right now, though, is all of these bills, all of the people working on them are they have a um,
It's a
some
bit
kind
of
of
a
a
neck and neck race, right? And some animosity
yeah, and
between them.
and the
So it's
original
horse
deadline
trading.
for individual deadline for bills being kind of done. I mean, the legislature session only goes to the end of this month, so those
Mm.
deadlines have already had to been extended. So
It's crunch time,
they have
literally.
a workshop every week, and I think Tuesdays is when they do it. And there's a selected set of people that are working on all these bills, and they're horse trading. Yeah, that's what they're doing. Is they're
Obviously, yeah.
so we're going to get something that comes out that's not going to be any one of those bills.
Mm.
Um, It may
they
be
want some kind of compromise that everybody
it may
can
be the
vote on,
name.
and
It may be named as one of those bills, so it might be called CJ, but it's going to have other stuff.
obviously, yes, 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 yeah,
You know, number
because
of
you
amendments.
know they can't accept all of these bills.
Oh,
It
right. Yeah, they won't. Yeah, yeah.
there's
And like I
probably
said, they
going to
won't
be
actually get.
conflicting stuff in there, or you know.
Yeah, and they wouldn't even, I mean, they probably won't even get one of these bills as it's written right now. And so they'll get some legislative package. Oh, and the governor has a bill. I forgot about that. so so governor's bill has credits for the nuclear plants.
Hmm.
It also has a carbon tax, $9 or something like that a ton. Um, but as
That's
you may or
cheap,
may
by the
not,
way. We
oh, it's very
Europeans, we
cheap.
are already at you know, the equivalent of
Yeah.
$75 per ton.
Yeah, it's well, it's cheap, and it's also just for Illinois. So all those out of state, you know, providers, generators are going to be able to work around that probably. So a per state carbon tax doesn't have a very good chance of working well.
Mm.
Um, and so the amounts of money that the credits provide in the governor's bill are not enough to save the plants. Exelon has
Yes,
made that clear.
because that's what is happening right now. They're trying to offset, you know, the loss of revenue by assigning value to the existence of the plants themselves and the electricity that they deliver at low CO2 cost, at low
Mm-hmm.
CO2 emissions.
Right, right.
It's positive to note that at least Axelon is. Uh, I mean, they still value these plants. These plants are valuable assets to them. It's not something that they will throw away lightly. You know, they would rather keep the plants and have them be,
Mm-hmm.
you know, at least somewhat profitable. So I understand that, you
Yeah.
know, they I mean, they obviously have skin in the game. So
Yeah, no, they do, and they want, I do think they want to keep the plants running, but it's not real. If you want to, so here's the other big wrench that's been thrown into this whole into the works of this thing,
mm,
and that's that ComEd, which is an Exelon company. Um, ComEd's the utility, right? They're the people that I get an electricity bill from,
mm,
right? And they take generation from places like Exelon, which is technically a different part of that company, but not totally spun off um, at this point. But the way that the deregulated markets work is that you still have a monopoly at the distribution and transmission
mm.
level, but you have competition in the generation part of the mix. So um, they are in the midst of a pretty big controversy. There's been they've been ComEd in particular has been lobbying, and really it's the whole company. I mean, some of the lobbying practices that they've done turn out to be not really very up. They're not above board, and they're just basically just stuff that they shouldn't have been doing. Um, they've been called on the carpet. They've been fined, a couple of $100 million. I mean, it's
Boy.
not for a company like that. It's not huge, but it's big enough to get their attention. And basically, nobody wants to do anything to help them because they've done
It's tainted.
some things that they shouldn't have been
Yeah.
doing. And the former Speaker of the House, which is the longest serving Speaker of any House in the entire country, is was involved in that, and may actually be charged, with something, some at some point now we hear
Yeah, yeah.
they've got
He's
more,
liable.
and he's gone right from the legislature, but that whole thing is still just a mess. And so what you have is a whole bunch of legislators that are like, well, you can convince me that the nuclear plants are good, but I don't want to give Exelon any, one thin dime,
All right.
right? And so it's a hard thing to do. And what I encourage people to think of it is, these are two totally separate things. If you want to
Yes.
punish Exelon,
Yes.
then
Punish
punish
Exelon.
Exelon. Do whatever, I mean, more fines
Yeah.
or more oversight or whatever,
Don't choose.
and
Yeah.
these bills do have provisions in them for holding all utilities accountable, but in particular, the bigger ones, and there's language in most of them to prevent many of the things that happened.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. But the troubling thing is that you know they don't see things from a holistic perspective. They don't understand that the nuclear power plants as I mean, obviously, I'm a bit of a technocrat here. I'm just choosing to choosing to make stuff as black and white as possible. The nuclear power plants are a good, valuable climate asset in and of themselves, regardless of
right,
who owns them.
right,
So they should be protected. Because if you lose them, that means more coal or more gas burning, across state lines. But
for sure. Yep.
the pollution will waft into your state anyway.
Right, and it's going to be at plants that are in areas that poor people live. I mean, that's bottom line, is it's going to affect them more than us, and us in the upper middle class suburbs. Or I mean, I couldn't even tell you where the closest power plant is here. I mean, to
Mm,
me, right? So I mean, we just don't have them
yeah.
like that. But my point that I try to make is that yeah, keep Exelon accountable, and all utilities, you know, do, extract your pound of flesh or whatever. But if you want to do that, letting them close the nuclear plants doesn't do that.
No.
It doesn't hurt
It
them at all.
no.
It doesn't.
It punishes the people who live in the neighborhoods.
Everybody else pays the price instead of, so you really have to look at those as totally different things. And that, the Kuja bill does, I mean, it's relatively generous, with its with the credits that it's provided. But as far as I'm concerned, I mean, the nuclear plants are still underappreciated, even with all of
Yes,
that
absolutely.
carbon mitigation credit that would be part of that. It's, or the FIJA bill, which is, similar in nature and I think quantity. My electric bill at my house, is well north of 100 US dollars, in a month. It's pretty good sized suburban house,
Hmm.
and we have pretty good electric rates here. Um, a little over $1 of that keeps Quad Cities and Clinton running.
Yeah.
And for my money, I mean, I'm very happy to give them that money to keep those assets running, because that's 3.5 gigawatts
Yeah.
of reliable, always on power, and it represents tens of millions of tons of CO2. I mean, that we don't get emitted, and people don't die from the other emissions. So
Exactly. I think that's the bottom line,
yeah,
Alan. That's something that we should end on. I mean, the nuclear power plants are there. They don't emit any CO2 or harmful particulates. And once they're gone, they will not be replaced by much renewables, probably existing assets or perhaps new gas-fired power plants, as you can see with Indian Point, for instance, in New
sure,
York.
yeah,
And the only people and if the object or if the objective is punishing Exelon, it's not going to hit its mark. They will lose two assets, Byron and Dresden, but in the end, it's the people that are going to lose out.
well, and they'll lose them on their terms, right?
Yes,
So
exactly.
they've already said what they're going to do.
Yes,
So it's not a punishment to allow them to continue to do that.
exactly.
That just allows them to punish the rest of the world for wanting to be a little bit more profitable. So you
Yeah,
know it's a
this is
cheap way to save a lot of clean energy,
mm,
to keep a lot of clean energy on the grid.
exactly. So
well worth it.
this is where I would like to end our conversation for the YouTube audience. I'd like to thank everybody for sticking with us and have a nice day.